This is the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Hello. This is Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news today about pensions. And as I said, my friend Ted Siddell and myself, we just published a book called Who Stole My Pension? And we decided to do a 5-part series with having real people who are really involved in this pension thing rather than some Wall Street talking heads on CNBC or Fox News. What are people really doing about pensions and how real is it? And as you know, today there's a thing called the coronavirus, which is not good news for pensions. And it's also not good for baby boomers because you may or may not know that every day today, 10,000 baby boomers retire every single day. And this coronavirus likes old guys over 70s. So it's even worse than we ever thought. So I want you to pay attention to this show because, Sarah, what number is this in the series?
This is episode 4.
Number 4, and it keeps expanding because more and more people call in and says, did you know about this? Did you know about that? And it's pretty serious because this coronavirus is just one thing, but this pension is the biggest thing going because it's a global series. And so the book is Who Stole My Pension? It's written by Ted Siddell. And he is a former SEC attorney, and he writes about the defined benefit pension plan. Defined benefit pension plans, for those who may not know, are industrial age pension plans. That's when you work for a company or a government for, let's say, 25 years, or the military, and you got a paycheck for the rest of your life. Those are defined benefits. The benefit was defined. And then the second type is the information age pension, which is called the defined contribution or DC pension plan. In America, they're called 401ks, IRAs, and in Canada, they're called RRSPs. In Australia, they're called superannuations. In Japan, they copy everything we do. They're called 401ks. But anyway, they're all in trouble, and this is a global problem. So Ted and I wrote this book, Who Stole My Pension? Because young or old, it's going to affect all of us because this pension problem is the biggest thing that's happening in the real world. And even if you're young, you may not have a pension again. So you better start thinking about it today. So that's kind of what we're writing about. So I'm going to ask, and our guest today is my partner in many real estate deals. And we've made fortunes, especially after the 2008 crash when market prices dropped on property. We thought we died and went to heaven. But not only did heaven provide with lower price real estate, they kept dropping interest rates. The cost of money kept going down. And so it's really going to be a good time if you're prepared. But this time it is different. This is not 2008 anymore. This is now 2020. And so, ladies and gentlemen, it's a very important Rich Dad radio program, Who Stole My Pension? So let me introduce Ted first. Ted, welcome to the show once again.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Robert.
Yeah, and would you explain once again, what I love about it is how you came to be a pension expert, but how you and I have similar stories about our fathers. You know, my father, I became aware of pensions back in 1973 when my poor dad lost his job, his paycheck, and his pension. That's when he became poor. Even though a PhD, he had no pension. And that destroyed him. So what was your story there, Ted, relative with your father and what happened to you to wake you up about this story called pensions?
Well, my dad was working in East Africa in a country known as Uganda, which was run by a brutal dictator named Idi Amin, who eventually killed 500,000 of his own people. But my dad was working with the CIA and had gone out on a mission to find out whether Amin had brutally murdered 300 people in his first month as president of Uganda. And my dad disappeared. He was very young. He was in his early 40s. So he disappeared, and eventually it was determined that he had been murdered by Amin. But in the 2 years, for 2 years after he disappeared, he was missing but not dead, so his estate couldn't be probated, his life insurance couldn't pay, and Social Security wouldn't pay. And he was in his early 40s. He didn't have time to build up a pension. So the good news is that after a few years, a court in Uganda issued a presumptive certificate of death, and the money from his estate was freed up. But he did not, like your dad, did not have an opportunity to enjoy a pension or retirement for that matter.
And it affected your family because you were still a young guy, weren't you?
Oh, I was 17 years old.
Right.
Yeah, I just turned 17 the week before he disappeared.
Right. So Ted and I are co-authors of this book, Who Stole My Pension, because there's millions and millions of people, baby boomers and young people today with the stock market going down. And the old guys, boomers, are in serious trouble health-wise with this coronavirus and no pensions. On top of that, their kids are in trouble. You have student loan debt going through the ceiling and the stock market crashing. The bond market's in a bubble. Real estate's in a bubble. So what do people do today? And that's why this series, part number 4, right, Sarah? Yes. And so I don't know how many more parts of this pension problem, but it is the biggest crisis facing planet Earth today because it is a global crisis. I mean, Japan is toast. Everybody's toast. So our guest today is my partner, Ken McElroy. And in 2005, 2006, we were kind of worried because back in those days, the real estate market was going through the roof as it is today. Okay, this is 2020. The real estate market in Phoenix is going through the roof today in 2020. In 2004, 2005, it was going through the roof again, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Different reasons this time around, but yes.
Yeah, and then when the markets crashed due to the subprime crash, it was good for us, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah. We were on the other side of that, which worked out really well.
Yeah. So give us your background too, and maybe why you're still looking for a 401k because you need to retire.
Well, as you know, I've been involved in real estate my whole life. I started in college with a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and now we own just over $1 billion worth of real estate, mostly multifamily, self-storage, office, but mostly multifamily. And as you know, Robert, people needed a place to live when they lost their homes. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about that. And, a lot of them moved into apartments, most of them.
But at the time, too, a lot of people are moving out because they were buying homes. They couldn't afford.
Well, that was before. I remember you and I were sitting there going, we're denying people that their credit's not good enough to rent, but they're buying homes. So there's got to be a problem coming soon.
Yeah. And then Ken and I were at Safeway. And the checkout clerk gives us her business card, says, I flip houses. And we go, it's time to get out of the market.
That's a true story. Yeah, I know.
So this was 2008. And today, as I'm talking again, this is March 2020. This would be delayed a little bit. I'm sitting on the plane, and the young lady sitting next to me says, I just put my home up for sale. It was gone in one day. Did I sell too early? I said, well, maybe you sold at the right time. You never know, right?
You never do know, right?
Yeah. So anyway, it's another crazy market. It's 20 years, 10 years, 2008 to 12 years, 2020. So Ted, explain how you see this virus, affecting the stock market, and how does the stock market affect pensions for firefighters, police officers, school teachers, and labor unions? What do you see now today, 2020?
Well, what's so dangerous and different today, Robert, is at this point, America's public pensions, state and local pensions, are only, on average, 70% funded. So that means they have 70 cents for every dollar they owe. So if you have a significant, and that's on average, some states are down into the low teens, like Kentucky, for example. So if you have a 10% market decline or 20% market decline, the pension system is already faltering, and that could be devastating. So one of the things people often forget is in the dot-com years leading up to the new millennium, leading up to 2000, the late 90s, pension benefits around the country were actually increased. Many state and local pensions were fully funded and in such great shape they actually increased benefits because the market went up. Well, that's never going to happen again. Because pensions are already underfunded, when the market goes up, pension benefits will not be increased. But when the market goes down, pension benefits will likely be cut. So that's what's so devastating about the coronavirus hitting the U.S. and globally right now is almost certainly it will lead to further pension cuts, and already half of the nation's pensions have been cut since 2008. So this kind of a market downturn will likely lead to more cuts. That's what's so frightening.
And this is a global issue. It's all over the world this time.
Yes, yeah, and globally, pensions are severely underfunded, yes.
So if you have a crystal ball, you go in the future, let's say 5-10 years, what do you see happening to old guys like me?
Well, if you've got all your eggs in one basket, and that basket is a pension, I see you getting potentially less and less money over time. That's the more likely scenario. The scenario that you would get more and more money over time is nil. That's just not going to happen. Will your benefits stay the same? Possibly, hopefully. But there's no upside for you and potential severe downside.
So again, once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. This is program number 4. Ted Siddell is an former SEC attorney, largest whistleblower on pensions in the United States. And he knows what's happening in the pensions from the inside looking out. It's interesting that I'm going to have one of my best friends also were pilots together in the Marine Corps. And a lot of my friends flew for the airlines. And so when I got out of the Marine Corps in 1974, they all went to fly for United and to Western and America, those guys. So, Ted, what happened to those pilots' pensions, my classmates?
Well, the pilots, starting with the United Airlines pilots back in 2006, the pilots had very good pension benefits because they had very high salaries, but they were some of the first to lose those pension benefits when United turned over its pensions to the PBGC, the Federal Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation. So they saw their pension benefits get slashed by almost 2/3 in some cases, and so did the U.S. Air pilots. Had the same thing happen to them. So many of them told me that they told their children who were pilots to stay in the military because the benefits were better in the military than they were working for a major corporate airline.
And so today we have Kenny McElroy, again, he's my partner. It's a good thing I got out, force it out. But anyway, so we're talking about real estate, and a lot of people are calling me up and they say, is it time to jump into real estate? And so, Kenny, what do you say to people who know nothing about real estate? Is it time to jump in and make it your pension?
No, I get that call almost every day too. Obviously we're still involved. We're building a lot. So we're building 150 to 200 million a year in multifamily. There still is a need for rental housing because there hasn't been a lot of construction. However, it's not when people ask me that, they're trying to time a market. So, I always tell them I think that's a bad idea. If the prices of housing is already back to where it was before the crash, and but interest rates are really low right now. So, the coronavirus has helped me. We're refinancing, so we just locked a 30-year deal last week, Robert. 10 years interest only, 2.75 fixed.
Jeez.
So we're hedging inflation. I think we're going to see inflation. So we're refinancing as much as we can, and honestly. Because rates are low, it does make homes more affordable, which is...
But also the prices will go up.
That's right. Yep, that will definitely happen.
And so I get these phone calls. Should I jump in? Should I flip? I'm going, This is probably the worst time if you don't know anything, this is the worst time to jump into real estate.
Yes.
Because it's in a bubble also.
It is, absolutely. And it's, before it was different. There was a lot of investor loans, and that kind of drove it up. And then, of course, they packaged those up and sold them off. But this is different. This is a lot different.
So once again, this is Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about pensions. We're talking to Edward Siddell. He's my co-author on the book, Who Stole My Pension? I know if you're not a boomer, say, well, I don't have to worry. Well, that's a good attitude. You don't have to worry, but you better worry what you're going to do, because I don't think this market's going to come back. And someday you'll be an old person too, if you're lucky. What are you going to do then? Or what are you going to do when your mommy and daddy, the boomers, move in with you? That's really a pretty serious problem today. Also on the other side, this is a great opportunity, because Kenny and I made fortunes after 2008. It was the best time to be real estate investors. But if you're a flipper, you got screwed a lot. So anyway, it's a very exciting time. When we come back, we're talking more to Ted and more about Kenny, what you can do to not become a victim of the biggest financial crisis in world history. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about pensions. And today our guests are my business partner in real estate, Ken McElroy, and my partner in my latest book, Who Stole My Pension, Ted Siddell. Is a former SEC attorney, and he's also the biggest whistleblower. I mean, he goes in, and he could have played along with the SEC guys who did just play along with these big pension guys. But Ted, his conscience got to him, and he blew the whistle on how Wall Street was ripping off these pensions. So, Ted, would you explain to our audience what a whistleblower does, and should everybody jump into becoming a whistleblower? No, I'm only kidding.
Well, since Dodd-Frank, we have at the SEC and the other securities regulators, like the CFTC, which is the commodities regulators. Under Dodd-Frank, there are whistleblower bounty programs established so that people who are aware that companies and money managers and pensions are committing fraud can turn them in to the SEC and get an award. And I was able to get the two largest awards in history, $30 million from the CFTC and $48 million from the SEC, for going to these federal government agencies and blowing the whistle on J.P. Morgan, a major bank.
It's amazing you're still alive. It's amazing you're not wearing concrete boots and floating somewhere in the Atlantic.
Well, it's usually the guys who have nothing to lose that you have to worry about when you're investigating. I call them the people that aren't worth killing. If the small money manager, the Ponzi scheme guy who is going to lose everything when you blow the whistle on them, those are the guys you have to worry about. The big banks, not so much. They can pay in my case, $367 million fine, with in the blink of an eye. That's nothing to them. But what I do is I go out. I've done over $1 trillion in forensic investigations of pensions, and I go into these pensions, whether it's CalPERS in California or pensions in Nashville, Chattanooga, Jacksonville, Florida, and I look at what they're invested in. And see what's wrong. And if I see something wrong, I report it to the government. And thankfully, the government from time to time agrees with me and is willing to pay me a lot of money for finding out and blowing the whistle on that wrongdoing.
And it's how big, you've studied the world. Inside Who Stole My Pension, again, it's a global problem. You list some of all the countries in the world with these problems. What would you say to the people of the rest of the world with pensions, the old guys like me? What's going to happen to them? Which countries are in trouble?
Well, what we're seeing now, and of course what we have in the book, Robert, is how we in America are the premier manufacturers of financial weapons of mass destruction. Wall Street in America is the premier innovator of toxic investments. And those investments that have wreaked havoc on American pensions are now being exported abroad. For the first time, countries like Japan and Australia are invested in the toxic garbage that we are creating, selling around the world. So the future for many of these foreign pensions are that they're going to suffer a great deal as these, what are the highest cost, highest risk investments ever devised by Wall Street. Hedge funds, hedge fund of funds, private equity funds are exported abroad, and these pensions that are severely underfunded and ready to roll the dice on these high-cost, high-risk investments gamble and ultimately lose.
Amazing. Any comments there, Ken, on this?
Yeah, thank you, Ted. I had a couple questions. You know, when you do that $1 trillion in forensics and you bring something to the SEC, what exactly are they looking at? You know, because what I just witnessed was, you know, Wall Street coming in and gobbling up in the last 12 years all these single-family homes, you know, 4 or 5 million of them. You know, people lost their homes, and then, you know, they've kind of securitized all these, and it's been a very interesting business in the real estate arena to have these guys step in. But you know, now when you talked about, you know, toxic things, are you talking about fees or excessive fees?
Well, talking about what I primarily look at is excessive and undisclosed fees, conflicts of interest, and illegality. So very, like in real estate, overvalued properties. That would be an example. Fraudulent, you know, where, let's say a company, let's say a public company, has a real estate portfolio, and let's say they have a captive appraiser who works for the company and values the entire real estate portfolio and, of course, marks it up, not down. So that would be a financial fraud that would show up on a publicly traded company's financial statements. That would be something the SEC would be interested in, because the company is a public company fraudulently valuing its assets would cause investors to pay more for that company stock, and when the fraud is exposed, the company stock would go down in value. So that would be an example of the type of fraud in the real estate sector that the SEC would be interested in.
So when you blew the whistle, what was the fraud that you uncovered?
Well, what I uncovered was that J.P. Morgan was steering clients into their own proprietary products, and not properly disclosing the fees and kickbacks in those proprietary products. So they were supposed to be putting their clients in the best performing investments, but they were actually steering them, what they called guided architecture. They were gently guiding their clients into their own products, which were not as good.
So how long, and you have a lot of business today, don't you? That's what I'm trying to say. I mean, this is pretty pervasive all over the world, because that's what Wall Street was doing.
It's crazy what's going on out there. Right now, I'm very much involved in life settlements where people are investing in life insurance policies on terminally ill people.
Viaticals?
What do you think the fraud being in that arena?
Jeez.
Yeah, viaticals, life insurance policies. Tremendous amount of fraud in this area.
There is,
because, how long are these people going to live? Well, according to the person selling the investment, they're going to die any day, but they don't die. So it's a very legally dicey area of, do we really want strangers taking out life insurance policies on terminally ill people? I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah,
that's of a financial innovation that's very questionable. And the Virgin Islands pension fund lost a ton of money investing in these life settlements.
It's called You Bet Your Life, is it?
Yeah, no kidding. So, Ted, I had a question. So, this is Ken. People have been turning their money over to people, without any kind of financial education for a long, long, long time. Is this new? Because, I've been hearing about these kinds of things going on over year, and, laws get passed, and it seems like we just continually prey on the folks that are, scooping their little bit out of their paycheck, and the employers are rolling it up into their 401ks or a DB plan or whatever. And then that money just gets invested, because those people come to me, I've obviously did some stuff with Lehman Brothers, and, we're in the discussions with Blackstone, and, and a lot of these big groups, they're grabbing all this managed money, and they're just trying to figure out a way to place it. So is this new?
Well, some of the things that are new that are happening are obviously the internet facilitates fraud like nobody's business, because you're constantly dealing with people you don't know their identity, you don't see them in front of you. And of course, one of the subjects of Who Stole My Pension is we have this demographic boom where the global aging population is growing to 2 billion people, and that gives rise to elder fraud. Older people are more prone to being preyed upon. And I see this here because I live in Florida, which is the happy hunting ground for every Ponzi scheme in the world. So you'll have companies from Canada making calls, robocalls here, telling old people that the IRS is about to bring criminal charges on them and they need to transfer money into this and that. So elder fraud is big business in Florida. And so elder fraud, the aging population is really, fueling financial fraud. The internet is fueling financial fraud. And Wall Street has gotten less transparent in the last 20 years than it's ever been. So contrary to the trend that the information age would lead to greater transparency, it's actually led to less transparency. So those are all trends that are giving rise to a booming fraud market.
So, Ted, if somebody is a police officer, firefighter, a school teacher, or belongs to a labor union, like we had Mark Green from UPS, United Parcel Service, on, and you're counting on your defined benefit pension plan, what would you say to them? I mean, you got all your eggs in one basket, or like my friends who were airline pilots, they're out of money. What do you say they can do?
Reputedly, Mark Twain said, if you've got all your eggs in one basket, watch that basket. So that's clearly something that if you're a state worker or any worker that's depending on a pension, you need to watch that basket. And we, in Who Stole My Pension, we give them steps that they can take on how to get more to be more of a watchdog over their pension. So including going to websites where the financial statements are shown, and we talk about the most common frauds that pensions commit. And one thing I think all of your listeners will understand is in my 35 years of investigating pensions, I've never seen a pension that in its financial statements admits that its performance sucks. They all claim to be better than average. And you just know that can't be true. There has to be somebody out there who's worse than average. So these are the kind of things we point out in the book, that if your pension is telling you the performance is great, they all say that. So you need to look behind that. And so we give them things that they should look at so that they can get greater control over their pensions. Now, you and your partner in real estate have an alternative theory, which is create your own pension, and get greater control over your financial future that way. So either works, but if you've got a lot of money in a pension, you need to watch it more carefully. And we give in the book step-by-step instructions on how to do that. Alternatively, like our friend Mark Green said on the last show, build your alternative pension of your own, where you have more control.
Right, and that's what Kenny and I do. So we're going to talk about what we're still investing. What do you see? What do you see? Because look, it's going to be the biggest disaster in world history. It's also going to be the biggest opportunity in world history.
Well, there's still a big housing need. So that's the interesting part, even though single-family houses are up and even multifamily are up. But Ted, I'll give you a great story that happened. You know, I was, as you know, we do small syndications, but we also we pull money from broker dealers, and we work with pensions and life insurance companies and things like that. One time we were cutting a deal
and family offices.
Yeah, and family offices. One time we were meeting with a broker dealer, and we figured out that by the time they actually gave me the money, it was worth 87 cents of every dollar. So there had already been 13% of the fees taken by the time it got to me, by the time it got invested. And so I was like, well, so I'm really, this property really has to perform, because I'm not taking so if I get $1 from Robert, it's $1. It goes into the property at $1. But by the time I got it through these managed money groups, it was 87 cents by the time it hit me. And so we actually turned it down, because we were like, well, the only way to do that is through some massive value add strategy, or hopefully we hit the market like we've done, and then we could sell only to pay back that first 13%. And then, of course, as a general partner, I was even behind that. So that's why we decided not to move away. That's why we moved away from this money managed. The fees are crazy as they come down the line. There was at least three groups involved.
So once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're running out of time for this section. I want to thank my partner in this book, Who Stole My Pension, Edward Ted Siddell, again, an SEC attorney, biggest whistleblower around. And if you have friends, family members, or business partners who need to listen to this, you can check this program out on Rich Dad Radio. You can listen to all of our programs, because we think what we say is important. And we're an education company. We don't sell anything. But anyway, go to iTunes or Android on YouTube and have your friends and family members please listen to this program and get educated, because as Ted said, in the next few years, 2 billion people throughout the world will turn into old guys over 65. Our pensions are broke all over the world. So for many people, this is the best of times, or it could be the worst of times. So thank you, Ted. I'll catch you on the next program. And, I appreciate being a partner in this book, Who Stole My Pension.
Thank you, Robert. Great talking to you.
Thank you. And we come back, we'll be going into what you can do, what Kenny and I are doing, but also to reiterate the warning to you, this is not anything small. This is going to be the biggest crash in world history. The good news is it could be the best opportunity for you. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. I want to thank my partner in this book called Who Stole My Pension. This is going to be it's going to bring about the biggest financial crash in history. And the reason you should get the book is because a big crash is also a great opportunity. So that's Edward Ted Siddell. And still remaining with us is my business partner in many, many real estate investments. In the last crash, 2008, we thought we died and went to heaven because real estate prices came down, but so did interest rates, and they're just now heading towards zero. So it's even better before, but it's more dangerous than ever before. So before I continue on, Ken and I will go into what we're investing in, because we think it's a great time. Unfortunately, for the average person, this may be the last time they have any chance, especially for an old guy like me, or for a young millennial. What do you do now? Because I don't think pensions are coming back. I think those are an obsolete idea. We'll probably go to modern money, MMT, Marxist money theory, which is Bernie Sanders is just going to print money and give it to everybody. I think that's unfortunately the future, which will destroy the whole financial system. But before going any further, one of the persons I respect on YouTube the most, her name is Stephanie Pomboy. She worked for a man named Stanley Druckenmiller when she was 21 years old. And today she's one of the most sought after people, but you can't find her. She stays hidden. She's like most of the women here at Rich Dad, beautiful with brains. I just love that. She's very, very smart, and she's articulate. So I'm going to hear what she has to say. She said this not too long ago about how big this pension crisis is. So this is Stephanie Pomboy of Macro Mavens.
Catalyst, and for me, I keep coming back to the profit story as the catalyst because I think people are still in fantasy land about what earnings are going to be next year.
So are you expecting a fourth quarter 19 risk-off event on the scale that we saw last year, or is the more accommodative Fed policy going to put a damper on the downside risk?
I think there's a really good chance that we see a repeat of the fourth quarter meltdown this year. I think that, the chart on page 9, I expect will just repeat the pattern, and those earnings estimates will get slashed, and that will create some real turmoil in the markets, at which point, people will then start to scratch their heads like, does the Fed really have a handle on what's going on here? And does cutting rates more and expanding the balance sheet more, whether it's non-QE, QE, or real QE, QE, does that really set us up any better? So, I think that's, for me, that could be the catalyst. The other side of it that's kind of silently going on in the background, and to be honest, I'm just starting to think about this and try to figure out what the impact is. But on page 13, the sort of doomsday scenario is that the whole repricing of risk happens, and it reveals what the Fed and central banks globally have done through their years of repressive interest rate regimes, which is silently to bankrupt all of the pensions globally. I mean, essentially, these unfunded pension liabilities have mushroomed like we've never seen before, and they're completely untenable. For the U.S. economy, we're looking at over $6 trillion in unfunded liabilities now, with stocks basically near all-time record highs. So you've had this massive rally in risk assets, and yet the funding deficit has actually expanded in that time. And one thing that I'm starting to think about a little bit is that these guys, in their effort to make 8% returns in a, 1% risk-free world, obviously they went to every corner of the credit market and bought levered loans and all the most toxic stuff they could get their hands on to get that yield. They also were really big in all of these unicorn companies that are now starting to be revealed to be not so fabulous as, the valuations on these companies were completely fantastical. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out from the pension standpoint. Do we see a lot of these pensions, state and local governments having to put more money into their pensions because they have to write down a lot of the positions they had in those companies? It's just something I'm starting to think about, but I think that's going to be fascinating to watch as this cycle plays out, because obviously between Uber and WeWork and Peloton, you've had a lot of these companies where the valuations that were placed on them were revealed to be, let's say, a tad excessive.
So all you millennials out there, those are your goofy products: Peloton, WeWork, and Uber. And what they did, I'm not blaming you guys personally, but Wall Street did, they were looking for anything to sell these pensions. Anything, because as interest rates went down, she called it repressive or suppressive interest rates, which was good for Kenny and myself. It was bad for the pensions. And she estimates, in another interview I heard from her, that this pension crisis in America alone is anywhere from $6 to $14 trillion. And then we had Comrade Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren during this election. They're still in the market, some are still in the markets. They're going to have to bail out everybody. So we're probably going to go to MMT, modern monetary theory. I call it Marxist monetary theory, whereas the idea is if you printed money to save the banks, why not print money to save the poor people? That's the end of the world as we know it, as far as all capitalism as we know it, because our monetary system blows apart. On the other side of it, Ken McElroy, my partner, he's the author of Rich Dad's books on real estate. Please get them. You have another book coming out soon, which is more basic than the last basic book for people like me.
Yeah, that's right.
But look, what we're saying here, and she said it, this is a global crisis. This is the biggest crisis in world history. And if you're sitting there with your head stuck up your you-know-what or in the sand, you're going to miss one of the biggest opportunities possible. So, Ken, you're still investing in all this. What do you see? What are you doing? And I'll say what I'm doing. Okay, ready, go.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm still investing in new housing. So, there still is, if you look at the
Interest
last,
rates are so low.
they are, but also, Robert, there's not been a lot of new construction in the last 10 years because everything went sideways.
Right. What Kenny and I were buying was the stuff that everybody lost in 2008, all the speculators.
Right. And we bought those.
We bought them, all the flippers and all the guys that were just screwing the system. We don't flip property.
Right, but if you follow a population growth and the demographics,
how about the demographics out of California? They're moving
crazy.
to Phoenix.
Yeah, but also you've got immigrants and there's all kinds of stuff happening that's putting pressure on housing. That's why housing is rising. It's because there hasn't been new housing. So just in my world, we have to add 350,000 units a year just to break even with the growth in population.
And Kenny is also a builder as well as a guy who finances established product. Okay?
Right. So what's happened is they say that there's a glut till 2025 for rental housing, just as an example. So that's the train we're on at the moment. There's a massive demand in that area. But I think the biggest issue here, Robert, as you know, this is the same issue. This is why Rich Dad was created. Was if you guys are turning your money over to somebody else and expecting it to grow, then this should be a massive wake up call for you, because the investors that are investing with me, Robert, are like you. It's your actual dollars coming to me, and we're putting it into a property, and you're on title. It's way different than if you're handing it to a pension, and the pension's giving it to me, and then there's fees taken all the way along the line until it finally hits your quarterly statement. That's the difference. You're actually coming directly, right to me. You're on title, and you're buying rental properties, and you're seeing the actual numbers.
Right. So what Kenny is talking about here is one of the goals I set out to become as I got older and more wiser, and all the stupid mistakes I made, was ultimately get to a position called a family office. And a family office is a family, a private business that has so much money, they've got to keep placing it. And so when Kenny calls me up, I get very upset with him when he doesn't already have my money placed for me, because I've got to move this money as fast as I can. So Kenny calls up, I saved you X, and I moved that money.
That's right.
A lot of guys are family office guys.
That's exactly right, Robert. You've grown to a family office. Essentially what he's saying is you're actually managing your own money.
Yeah.
That's it. What's happening mostly, like even my parents, my dad had pensions, they give it through their employer to someone else. They don't even know the name of the person that's investing it. They don't even know what it's investing in, and then they look at their quarterly statements and, didn't make any money this time. And then they, and that's it. And so, the reason that I love speaking with you, the reason we write these books is because we're trying to teach people how to ask better questions and to look at, and you can definitely manage your money directly, and you should understand all the fees and everything all the way through.
Yeah, and possibly, I don't have a 401k, I don't have an IRA, I don't have a pension. I'm not counting on the government, but I had to do my part to get to that position. So Kenny and I have been partners for 20-something years now, and we've grown together, made mistakes together, come up with that. We now have Christina, who runs our, how I made my money section for Rich Dad. She is really my family office manager. She manages hundreds of millions of dollars. She's not my secretary. It drives her crazy when people, you're a secretary? No, I'm not. So just to FYI for those, especially you boomers, you want to get to the point, not where you have a pension, but maybe someday you can have a family office, which you have so much money coming in, and you're moving it back out. Right, Kenny?
Yeah, essentially the model is work really hard and then give a piece of your cash away to somebody else and not call them. That's essentially what everybody's been doing, and that's essentially what's happening now. And the only reason that people are, rolling into the reason real estate is even on the radar right now is because of the coronavirus. That's it. Everybody's like, oh, I made X in the stock market. I'm making Y, blah, blah,
And the
blah.
market's crashing as we speak.
Yeah, I'm getting my texts, my emails are getting blown up, and they're saying, oh, are you afraid? I go, of what? I'm not even in the stock market. And by the way, I just locked a 2.75 on a 30-year deal, 10 years interest only. I'm borrowing less than inflation.
So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, this is what Rich Dad was created for, is financial education. Sadly, most people won't do anything. It's 1 out of 100. And that's why Kenny and I are partners and friends for all these years. One more thing is I'm investing like crazy. Kenny knows I have this property right on Camelback Avenue in 32nd, the prime real estate. And it used to be a health club. And the baby boomers are so old now. Kim and I are converting it to old age housing. And Kim's reserving the penthouse for me. Because there's one thing you cannot stop is you cannot stop getting older, So that's going to be another boom industry. Another thing I'm investing in is our friend Greg Jagger's school. Why do I invest in schools? Because the source of funds comes from the government, from the state of California and the federal government, because every child must have an education. And he's, with that source of funds, he's also buying more real estate. And because we buy more real estate, we lever with debt, means we borrow more money, and then we pay less taxes because of appreciation, depreciation, amortization. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, that's what Rich Dad was created for, and maybe someday you too can have a family office. Final words, Kenny.
I just say, just follow the trends, just follow the trends.
Well, no, don't follow the crowd.
Follow the trends. So, right, like what you said, everybody's getting older. Of course, you're going to have assisted care facilities and senior housing issues. You're going to have medical issues. You're going to have health, all those, everything health related. And you're going to have, just follow the trends.
And rich or poor, you generally need a roof over your head unless you live in some city where homelessness is excessive, and that's growing at a tragic rate, isn't it? It's horrible.
It is. Rent affordability is a big deal right now, and it's some of the states are passing rent control and things like that, which of course does not work, but we definitely have an affordability issue.
So once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, The Rich Dad Radio Show. Thanks to my partner there in the book, Who Stole My Pension. Everybody get that book, read it, because it's the biggest crash coming, but it's also the biggest opportunity coming. I want to thank my partner in real estate, Ken McElroy, and I hope we give you some ideas that it's always a good time to get rich. Thank you for listening to The Rich Dad Show.
tôi xa quê bao năm tháng qua, nhưng trong trái tim không bao giờ xa. Lời mẹ ru con hiu hiu trẻ, mùa lụt nước lũ bắt cá giữa đường, biển trời